Hey everybody, last time that we talked about Chinese geography, as you see the map right over here, and this time in the crash course in 10 minutes we're going to talk about Chinese history in 10 minutes, alright? And most of you probably have your knowledge obsolete about what's going on in Chinese history, and so I'm going to give you a crash course, alright? So in the beginning, in the very, very beginning, like a biblical beginning, there's nothing. We don't know anything about. But Chinese history starts somewhere over here in Henan province and Anhui province. And the first thing we know is that there's so-called San Huang Wu Di, which is like the 3 emperor and 5 emperor. Basically, and they started this tribal area somewhere around here in Henan and Anhui province. And the first legendary dynasty, what we're talking about, is the Xia dynasty. Xia dynasty started from over here in the Henan province. And the Xia dynasty started going along a couple hundred years into, and then this crazy emperor, and then they got overthrown by a better emperor called the Shang dynasty. Shang dynasty was over here, and they're actually coming from the coastal area, from the Shandong area, and they're coming over here, and they're taking over here. But basically, this is all the heartland of China. So Shang dynasty taking over China for another hundreds of years, and like 500, 700. I'm not going into detail. But Shang dynasty, they later on crumbled because there's some kind of tribal chieftain from the west, and that's from here. And they basically kicked their ass, and I'm not going to go into their saga because there's a lot of saga going on. And they kicked their ass, and we have this Western Zhou dynasty. Shizhou dynasty, which means the Shizhou, Western Zhou dynasty. They're still roaming around this area, but Shizhou dynasty was like a total feudal institution. That means they divided their kingdom into a lot of different these fiefdoms, and all these little fiefdoms they divided into like dukes. Barons, all of these different little places here and there. They call their little kingdom here and there, and later on they disintegrated. And they disintegrated. They disintegrated all the way into they call it the warring states. By the warring state, so they disintegrated into a lot of different little states all over different places, and all the way when we have the Qing dynasty emerging out of some obscurity from Shanxi, and Shanxi province right over here. And legend says that they actually have some common ancestor with the Tibetans, which is like over here. But basically these are ferocious peoples, and from the Qing dynasty they start to conquer over the rest of China, and that's why we have the first Qing emperor, and we have the first so-called Qing emperor that united China. But what we meant by united China was inside the Great Wall, and he's responsible for creating the Great Wall over here. Alright, so created a Great Wall over here. We have the Qing dynasty, but he didn't get his life long. Qing dynasty only lasted about like 2-3 decades long. And then we have another civil war going. There's the Xiangyu on the south, and then Liu Bang on the north, and they're kind of fighting another civil war going on. And finally, Liu Bang defeated itself and finally create the Han dynasty, and that coincided with the Roman Empire. That was around the height of Roman Empire. It was at about the same time that China created the greatest empire, the Han Empire. That's basically where all of us, 95% of Chinese that are called Han ethnicity. Basically is starting from the Han Empire. Alright, Han Empire didn't last that long. Han Empire had a lot of little shit going on. I'm not going to go to the detail. And Han Empire started to disintegrate at about 200-300 years later. About like 200-300 AD, they start to disintegrate again. And there's a lot of civil war going on again. And then that period is called the Three Nations Romance. Basically, they disintegrated into three parts. There's the Wei in the north, and Wu in the east, and then the Shu in the southwest. But basically, after a lot of fighting going on later, they sort of united after all that fighting at around like 400 AD, and then they sort of had like a pseudo-united states, but they didn't really unite it. So they got into united, but then they disintegrated again. They disintegrated into so many different states, I cannot even name it. In the Chinese textbooks, they say there's like 16 states, but it's definitely more than that. There's a lot of northern nomads that are coming in from this part of the world. It wasn't until about like 600 AD, this meager state called the Sui dynasty that united this part, but it wasn't that long. And then finally we have this golden age called the Tang dynasty. Everybody knows the Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty finally united this part, all of China, all the way till the western part of China. This is the golden part of China, about 700 AD, 800 AD. But that didn't even last that long. And then guess what again? It disintegrated again. And then there's a lot of shit going on here. China is always fragmented, and then it fragmented again. And then there's the Song dynasty. Song dynasty was a meager Han dynasty, was really just in charge of this part, what they call the Northern Song dynasty. Northern Song dynasty, and they have a lot of nomads in the northern about them. I'm gonna have a separate lesson about what the fuck is going on with the northern part of China with all the nomads, because the nomads has a lot of things going on, harassing China for millennium. Anyway, Northern Song dynasty finally got defeated by the so-called Qing dynasty, which means gold. But that's another story. They got defeated. They got defeated all the way down to the Yangtze River, and that is so they got defeated all the way just onto the southern part of China. And so at that time, that's about 1100 AD. So what historically we call the Southern Song dynasty, and the northern part of China was all like the nomad territory. There's the Qida, and then the Yuan. There's all kinds of different dynasties going on in the north, all the nomadic people. But the Song dynasty, which is authentically Han dynasty, happened to last a little longer, but guess what? The Mongols. When Genghis Khan coming up, the Genghis Khan just like a flood unleashed out of nowhere. They just flush all over, not only China, they take over whole China, they take over the whole Central Eurasia, all the way to Eastern Europe, and they try to take over Japan, and Japan's only to be saved, and that's why they call it the kamikaze, because kamikaze basically means the godly winds that save them. And the Mongols basically, they're just like the tornado. They take over the whole thing. So they took over the whole China, and that's the Yuan dynasty. But it didn't last long. It only lasted about like 60 to 80 years. And then we have our Ming dynasty, some indigenous Chinese named Zhu Yuan, and then they take over here, and then a couple of hundred years ago, and a couple hundred years later, and then there's the Manchu from the Manchuria coming over here. They came down here and take over China, and we have our Qing dynasty. Qing dynasty lasted until 1911. And that is our basic Chinese history. And after 1911, we have modern Chinese history, which we're going to go into another lesson.